Hi everyone, and welcome to Making the Most Out of Networking, a webinar sponsored by the Lewis University Alumni Association and the Office of Alumni Relations. It is my pleasure to introduce Reggie Bustinza, the Director of Alumni Relations here at Lewis University. Reggie came to Lewis 2 years ago today exactly, so congratulations Reggie, from Bradley University, where he earned his Bachelor's in Communication and his MBA. While at Bradley, Reggie also served for 6 years in the Office of Alumni Relations. So while you're listening today and while you're listening at home, if you have any questions for Reggie or in the future, please go ahead and send them all to alumni@LewisU.edu, and we'll be able to answer some of those questions later on in this webinar. Now it's over to you, Reggie.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. And today we're going to talk about making the most out of networking. So we do networking events here at Lewis University, and we have one that's coming up at the end of the month on July 30th. And so we wanted to do a webinar where we could give people some tips, some hints, some ideas about what they can do to make the most out of their networking experience. The agenda for today is going to be to first look at what is networking, discuss what some potential networking goals and strategies are, and then finally what I'm calling tactical considerations, which is really just tips and ideas for how to do your best when you're networking. The first part of this agenda, the first 3 items, will take us about 10 to 15 minutes to go through, and then we'll spend most of our time probably on the very last item. So the first question is, what is networking? I think a lot of people get this kind of conception in their brain that it's a bunch of people standing around in suits, shaking hands, and trying to seal deals. Well, that might be some of it, but in reality, what networking really is it's simply building connections with other people. You do this all the time. In fact, it's something you've probably done since you started a talk. You're always networking. It's something that you always do. So it's not something that you should be afraid of. It's just something that comes naturally to people, is to build those relationships. And it's important to do because there's benefits, and we'll talk about those benefits, and it can be satisfying. But it's also important to do even when you don't think it's necessary at the moment, because you have to remember that your situations change, but your networks remain. So what might be your networking goals? The first area that we'll discuss here is professional enhancement. Honestly, that's probably why you're watching this webinar right now. Professional enhancement can include jobs, clients and sales leads, mentoring, and peer opportunities. I'll tell you a story about a friend of mine. His name's Brett, and he works in the print industry, actually in sales and print. Brett is just an excellent networker. He's involved in a lot of different organizations. He's out in the community. He's very sociable. He benefits because that's his personality, but he also puts in the effort to try to cultivate and maintain the relationships that he develops. Well, Brett, working in an industry that's perhaps not the most robust industry around, found himself out of a job. And this was back in 2009, right at the start of the Great Recession. Well, Brett was able to quickly reach out to his networks, posted on LinkedIn, posted on Facebook, sent out some emails, and he had another job 3 hours after he lost his job. I'm not exaggerating at all. It was by the end of the afternoon, he already had another job. That's a great example, probably the best example I can think of how networking can provide professional enhancement in the area of jobs. As far as clients and sales leads, that seems pretty obvious. If that's something that you do, sales, or you need to pursue clients, networking is a great way to obtain those things. And then mentoring and peer opportunity. I think that's an overlooked area. In particular, if you're involved with some sort of an organization that is industry specific, it's a great way to make friends within your industry, people that you can bounce ideas off of. Our alumni office is involved in a couple different advancement professional organizations, and I think all of us have made some really good connections through those opportunities, and we've used it many times when you're trying to develop an idea. It's great to be able to pick up the phone or shoot an email to somebody that you already know and kind of bounce ideas off of them. Likewise, if you're new in an industry, it's a good way to find a mentor. The other area of networking goals might be personal connection. I think a classic example is when you move to a new city or region. It creates an opportunity to help others, to make friends. I think that one thing that's great about networking as far as personal connection goes, which keep in mind that professional enhancement and personal connection aren't mutually exclusive. Oftentimes you end up doing both of these things. But if you're at a networking event or activity, or if you're just at a social event or activity, you're probably there with other people because of some sort of a shared interest or experience. For example, if you come to a Lewis networking event, well, what do you have in common? You all went to Lewis. So that's kind of a great way to get your foot in the door, to break the ice, and commiserate a little bit on that shared commonality that that all attendees may have. Likewise, we tend to make friends with people that are similar to us. So if you do get involved with a group or an organization, it's a good way to make friends because they're people that you already have something in common with. So let's talk about networking strategies. I think that this is kind of a broad topic, and I feel that it can be broken down into two primary areas. The first one is to build a personal brand. If you're not aware of what a personal brand is, it's basically a fancy way of saying your reputation. I think that the three things listed here all seem to be relatively obvious, but I think that they're all important in their own way. The first is to be genuine. Within that, I would say includes be yourself and be honest. Be yourself. You can maintain a facade for so long, but sooner or later that's going to break down and you're going to revert back to who you really are. And that's why it's important to be genuine from the beginning. Don't act like you know more than you do. Don't act like you have better connections than you do, because sooner or later those kinds of things will catch up with you. Furthermore, people can tell when somebody's disingenuous, and we tend to not like people that we think are not being forthright. As far as being honest, that should seem like a no-brainer, and just always be honest in all your dealings. But in particular, when you're building your personal brand, you don't want to have any sort of a reputation as being dishonest or underhanded in any way. Now, it's kind of funny because the next two items, be helpful and be knowledgeable. If you're not a helpful or knowledgeable person, then I guess I'm going to tell you to not be yourself. However, I think most of us are helpful and knowledgeable in our own way. I think be helpful is of critical importance, because when you meet somebody the first time and you make that first impression, if the person you meet is only out to help themselves, that comes through pretty quick. And that's going to be somebody you're probably not going to want to spend a whole lot of time with. So you want to be helpful. Think first about what you can do for somebody else and not even worry about what they can do for you. If you're genuine in yourself and honest and helpful, people will jump to help you, and that's what happened with Brett when he was looking for his job. As far as being knowledgeable, this one takes a little bit of work. I think we all probably have certain knowledge bases within our own industries or our own areas of expertise. Really work to develop that. A good reputation would be, especially in a professional setting, to be somebody that knows what they're talking about, somebody that has some experience and that has something positive to offer other people through their knowledge. So I think that when you look at building your personal brand, really focus on those three areas and you'll have a pretty sterling reputation, especially in the professional world. The other big area of networking strategies is opportunity. There's a saying that is, success is what happens when preparation and opportunity meet, and I think that this is a perfect example of that in action. The preparation is your personal brand, how you define yourself. Opportunity is when you apply that. So I would say opportunity falls in two main categories. There's organic opportunities and constructed opportunities. Organic opportunities are what happen all the time. They just happen naturally. People you meet at a party, people you bump into at work or in a class or in a setting. It's what happens when you're not necessarily trying to expand your relationships. When you're not necessarily trying to build those connections with other people. It just happens on its own. And that's a great way for things to just naturally develop. Constructed opportunities are when you actually go out and are pursuing that connection with other people. A couple examples would be associations or clubs. I have a great example of a friend of mine. Jenny was involved with her neighborhood association, and as such, she was a graphic designer, and she volunteered and did the neighborhood newsletter. Well, she did a great job, and she always did it selflessly and didn't really ask for anything in return. It was just a volunteer activity she did within her association. Well, there was somebody else on the board of the association who owned a medium-sized business, and they were in the process of considering some rebranding efforts. So they hired Jenny as a freelancer to rework their logo, their business cards, their letterhead, and even though she wasn't really pursuing it, she had this great opportunity just kind of dropped in her lap because she was involved in this neighborhood association. You know, don't discount the value of things like that. Neighborhood associations, alumni groups, clubs, your church. All these are great ways to meet and cultivate relationships with others. You know, one thing to remember too is for both this as well as professional mixers, which would include things like our alumni networking events, for example, or maybe a Chamber of Commerce business after hours, is don't wait to do that stuff until you're looking for a job. Now, if you're looking for a job right now, I'm not telling you that it's a waste of time to do it, because it's not. But if you go back to the being helpful, if you're out there looking for a job and that's why you come to these events, your first inclination is going to be to wonder, how can somebody help you get a job? It's not going to be to wonder, how can you help them? You know, sometimes if you wait until you're looking for a job, I won't say it's too late, but it's not going to be as effective as it will if you have these relationships and they kind of create a safety net so that if you do need to find another job or change your careers, you already have that built in and ready to go. Now, tactical considerations are, we're going to focus on the networking events and things you might do at networking events. Some of these things are definitely going to be things that you want to apply overall, but I think that a lot of these I'm going to speak to them more specifically as far as if you're at a networking event of some kind. To reiterate, think about how you can help first. I have another story. I have a friend, Marjorie, and Marjorie is really involved with an online game. And this online game involves real people out in the world. And Marjorie, because she loves this game so much, she started doing these group hangouts and kind of started cultivating a community of other gamers. Well, that caught the eye of the company that designed the game, and they flew her out to LA to tour their studios and stuff because they recognized that Marjorie was a really good representative for them. She was a person, the boots on the ground, so to speak, to help advance their message. Well, she continued to develop that reputation and her personal brand as being somebody that was knowledgeable and proactive and helpful. And when this company was looking for a freelancer to consult with them on a project they were doing, they hired her at a pretty generous level of compensation. And that's an opportunity that she wasn't looking for when she started organizing these things. She wanted to help. She wanted to meet people and give people an opportunity to mingle with each other. And this opportunity fell in her lap. Why? Because she had a strong personal brand and she was ready when the opportunity arose. You know, speaking of personal brand, you might want to consider your elevator speech, your elevator pitch. I believe that the term comes from the idea of if you're with somebody on an elevator just going up or down a few floors, you only have about 30 seconds maybe to talk with them. And your elevator speech, as far as your personal brand goes, is how would you describe yourself? How would you explain yourself or what you do? You know, I'll give you an example from myself. If I was going to give an elevator speech to somebody and said, Reggie, tell me about yourself. What do you do? I could say, I do alumni relations at Lewis University. Now, while that's factually correct and accurate, it's not very descriptive. It's going to leave them probably wondering, well, what does that mean? They're going to have some follow-up questions that I didn't define very well. I would say that's probably too little. You know, I could say I manage a dedicated team of professionals with the goal of strengthening mutually beneficial relationships between Lewis University and targeted constituent groups while supporting both university-wide and divisional strategic goals. Yeah, no human speaks like that, right? That would be way too much. First of all, there's too much jargon and too much corporate speak. Second of all, if you're communicating a message and somebody has to stop and think in order to decipher the message, you failed at the task of communication. So that would fall into the category of too much. Probably the good answer would be if somebody said, Reggie, what do you do? I could say, I get to create and maintain programs that benefit both Lewis University and its alumni, and I love it. That would be a good elevator speech. You see, it was about 5 seconds. It doesn't mean you have to limit yourself to that. But I think that it encapsulates what I do in a manner that is self-explanatory and leaves somebody saying, okay, I get it, I understand. Now, they may have specific questions, but they are going to at least get the gist of what it is that I do. You know, one thing that I kind of debated putting on here was this next item, being polite and considerate. Now, we were probably all raised to be like this all of the time, and I think most people are very polite and considerate by nature. There's a couple specific points I want to touch on here. The first one is leave the phone in the car. If you have to have it with you, leave it in your pocket. There's few things more rude than checking your text messages or taking a call while you're in a conversation with somebody. Of course, like all rules, there are exceptions. Let's say that you're waiting on a very important call and you have to take it. Well, there's a way to do that and a way to not do it. The way to not do it is to simply pick up the phone and start talking while somebody's standing there with you. That puts them in an awkward position because, first of all, they don't know if they're going to be considered rude and eavesdropping by standing there with you, but at the same time, they don't know how long you're going to be on the phone for. So do they walk away? Do they stay there and wait it out? What do they do? When you do that, you're putting somebody in a very difficult position, and it's just not something you should do. Now, if you have to take the call, give them a very brief, as you answer, give them a brief reason of why. You know, their phone rings, as you pull out of your pocket, you look at who it is, say, I apologize, I have to take this call because it's my sitter and she never calls and I need to make sure this isn't an emergency with my kids. Please excuse me. And with that, you're free to answer the call, and the person will understand that when you say excuse me, they can feel free to walk away and begin another conversation with somebody else. Another thing as far as being polite and considerate, if you're at an event or somewhere that has a TV on, I know it's difficult because our eyes are naturally drawn towards those flickering screens, but don't look at the TV while you're having a conversation with somebody. Don't glance up, even if it's just a habit. Even if you're not paying attention and you're giving your full attention to the person you're talking to, just don't look at the TV. It's very impolite. The other thing that you shouldn't do is don't look over somebody's shoulder to see who else is coming in the room or who else is around. This is one of the most inconsiderate and rude things that I think I've experienced. And basically what you're saying to the person is, I'm only talking to you until I see somebody better to talk to. That's not the kind of message that you want to send to people. And all that does is make you look like, well, like kind of a jerk. So I would strongly advocate that you don't do that. If you have to, if let's say you are waiting for somebody specific to come in, you can let them know that that's what you're doing. Say, you know, I'm paying attention, I'm sorry, but I just need to keep my eye open for my friend who's coming, and I need to greet them when they show up. That's not inappropriate. You know, still try to focus on them, give them your attention. Use eye contact if you can. Now, I understand that some people, culturally or personality-wise, that can be difficult. If it is difficult, look at them in their forehead or look at the tip of their nose, but otherwise try to make eye contact if possible. Why do you do that? It's because it shows that you're really listening. By really listen, I don't mean just wait until it's your chance to talk. And an alarming number of people do that. What I mean is when you're done having a conversation with somebody, you should be able to turn around and basically recite back what the key points of the conversation. I don't mean word for word resuscitation. I don't expect you to have that kind of a memory. But I mean if you should be able to say where they grew up, where they work, what they do, whatever the things you talked about, at least be able to give an overview. If you can't do that, then it means either you didn't do a good enough job listening, you didn't ask good enough questions, or you didn't spend enough time to get to know the person. You know, there's a saying, and that is, interested is interesting. So if you're listening and seem interested, then it will make the other person more interested in you. And part of listening is to have appropriate questions and not use one-word answers when you're asked questions. Let's talk about the one-word answers thing. I was at a networking event maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I met a young woman, and it basically felt like I was interviewing her. I asked her, so where do you work? Oh, at the high school. Okay, what do you do? I teach. Well, what subject do you teach? English. Do you like it? Yeah. Can you imagine how that conversation was? Well, I don't think you have to, because it was not very good. In fact, I was looking to extricate myself from it as quickly as I possibly could. You know, when you're at a networking event or just out, you're not there to interview people. You're there to converse with people. So don't use the one-word answers when you're asked questions. Please, just don't do it. As far as asking appropriate questions, yeah, I think that there's a couple things to consider here. One little tip is don't ask what they do necessarily or where they work. And the reason for that is because they may be somebody that is currently looking for work. And if you say, where do you work? It might make them feel kind of bad if they have to say, I'm between jobs. You know, I'm looking for work right now. Furthermore, if you say, well, where do you work? And the person is maybe a trained pilot, but they're having trouble finding a job, and so they're working at Starbucks 20 hours a week just because they need to make ends meet. And you say, well, where do you work? They may not want to tell you that they work at Starbucks, and no offense to those who do work at Starbucks, but they may want to tell you about what career they want to pursue. A good question to ask instead is, what field are you in? That way they can say, I'm in aviation. And if they choose to, they can say, but I'm looking for a job right now, I'm looking for employment, and it opens the door for them to give you some information. Also, as far as appropriate questions go, I think that you should have some general knowledge. Now, nobody is an expert in all fields, and I don't expect that of you. But it helps to have at least some basic knowledge of what's happening. If nothing else, at least some basic news and happenings knowledge. For example, if I meet somebody that says they're a helicopter pilot, well, that's going to be tricky for me to have a conversation with any sort of knowledge level, because the only thing I know about being a helicopter pilot is that the spinny thing on top is called a rotor. That's it. So what could I ask somebody that's a helicopter pilot? Well, maybe I could say, I've heard it's challenging to fly a helicopter. What's your experience with that? Did you learn first how to fly on an airplane? There's some things that you can ask that are just kind of basic questions that you don't have to have a whole lot of knowledge to ask, but they can kind of give the impression that you do have at least some rudimentary knowledge of what's happening. You know, if all else fails and you just are drawing a blank as to what questions to ask somebody, you can simply repeat what they ask you. So they may say, well, what was your major? You answer the question, and they say, and what was your major? That's about the simplest way to go, and it's something that you can always fall back on if need be. Make sure you bring business cards. It's not a competition, and I don't mean competition as in who has the nicest business cards. Nobody cares if it's eggshell colored with Romalian type. What I mean is it's not a competition to see who can collect the most business cards. If you walk away from a networking event that you're at for maybe an hour to 2 hours and you have 3 business cards, you had 3 good conversations in your pocket, to me personally, I would call that a success. Now, if you either work in an industry that doesn't give you business cards, or you don't have business cards because you're not currently employed, don't fear. At our Lewis networking events, we do provide blank business cards when you come in. You can take as many as you like. We give you a pen, and you can feel free to sit down for a minute and fill some out so that when you do go to exchange the business cards with people, you have something to give them. Now, not all places are going to give you that, but you can get business cards for free or cheap. I think you can get home print ones for a few bucks. I think Vistaprint offers some for free, perhaps. They used to. If not, they're very inexpensive to purchase. So if this is something you want to pursue, is going to these kinds of networking events, I think that it's a sound investment to make sure you have business cards. Some of that goes along with your personal brand. You want to look professional, you want to look sharp, and you want to be prepared. Now, when you go, don't sit with people you know. I know it's tempting. I know. Believe me. It's so much more comforting to not step out of your element and just sit with your coworkers, just sit with your friends. But you're not going to get a whole lot out of an event if you just talk to the people you know. It's kind of like programming, garbage in, garbage out. Well, if your effort going in is weak and you don't step out of your comfort zone and talk to people you don't know, you're not going to make a lot of new connections, if any at all. In fact, at our Lewis events, we try to have as few chairs as possible while still making sure that people who need to sit can. That's why a lot of people advocate using those tall tables. They call them high boys or bar tops. That's because it's easier to mingle if you're standing. You can kind of perch for a minute and then go and move on somewhere else. Whereas oftentimes when people are sitting at rounds, for example, they tend to park and just sit in the same place the whole time. hard to have conversations with a lot of different people, especially in a busy room, a loud room, even across a table. It can be very difficult. So makes it easier, makes it more effective to not sit with people you know. You know, it's better to be overdressed than underdressed. I think that, and I can only speak for myself, I would rather be the only guy in the room with a tie than the only guy in the room with cargo shorts. Now, what's appropriate for your networking events that you go to, that depends on the event. Different industries have different kind of codes of how they dress. If you aren't familiar with it, if you're new in the industry, ask around. There's nothing wrong with asking a friend or a coworker how they would recommend you dress. If you're starting out and you don't really know exactly how to dress, you haven't really developed your own style yet, one thing I would advocate for is when you watch TV or movies and you see people in office or professional settings, look at how they're dressed. See what they're wearing. Do you like what they look like? Do you think it's appropriate? How do you think you would look in something like that? There's nothing at all wrong with mimicking the styles that you enjoy. So it's better to be a little overdressed than underdressed. Now, typically we say business casual. So for men, that might mean if it's a hot summer month or if it's an outdoor thing, a nice polo and some pressed wrinkle-free pants, perhaps a sport coat, maybe a tie. A full suit is not necessary, but you won't feel out of place. For women, some sort of a suit or a nice blouse with some either nice pants or a skirt is very appropriate and something to keep in mind. Mind your food and drink. I shouldn't even have to say that you shouldn't get drunk at a professional event, but I'm going to say don't get drunk at a professional event. I don't care if it is a host bar. I don't care if they have your favorite kind of vodka in stock. Just don't do it. Limit yourself. Only drink what you can handle. There's nothing wrong with drinking. That's why they have it there. But don't overdo it. As far as food goes, this can be a little tricky. You know, I love me some chicken wings. I can go to town on a plate of chicken wings. I don't eat chicken wings at professional events because if there's a polite way to eat chicken wings delicately, I haven't learned it. Who wants to spend a half hour digging at one of those things with a fork and knife, right? So I just avoid them because they get your hands messy, they get your face messy, and if somebody walks up to you to shake your hand, do you really want your first impression to be a buffalo sauce smeared all over your lips and your hands all orange from the wings? Probably not. So mind your food. Think about what you eat. You know, I've heard it said that you shouldn't eat meatballs, not because they're particularly messy, although they can be, but because they can roll off your plate and onto your shirt. And you don't want to be the guy with the stain on your white shirt, do you? I don't. So, you know, I kind of try to avoid foods like that. Just use your own judgment. You know how coordinated you are. You know how easy it is for you to maintain those kinds of things. So I would say think about what it is that you are eating. I wanted to show you something. A lot of people wonder, how do I hold all my food or my drink when I'm at a professional event? And you have to have a hand free to eat with. You have to have a hand free to shake with. And a lot of times there's not a lot of table space. So what do? I'm going to show you. So if you're going to be at an event and you need to figure out how to hold everything, here's how I do it. You start with, you have your glass of wine or water. Put it in between your index and middle finger like this, so your thumb is free. You can then take your plate and you can pinch it just like that. You see how it sits in my hand? Just like that. And you can balance your food right on there. Your fork, you can hold like that. It can either rest directly on the plate, or you can kind of use your thumb to pinch it. And your napkin can go right underneath the plate, held up with your finger. Now look, I've got everything right here in one hand and leaves my other hand free to eat with or to shake with. So that's something you can try. Now, I'll admit my hands are relatively large, so it's not that difficult for me to do something like that. But if your hands aren't very big, you can still try it. And if worst case scenario, just find somewhere you can set your food and drink down while you're networking. Finally, make sure you follow up. You know, the point of networking is to build those relationships. And a relationship that's only been one conversation at one event is probably not going to be a very strong relationship. If you're needing advice or an industry connection, it's going to be a lot easier if you've maintained that relationship to some degree. Now, I don't mean that you have to go to lunch constantly or become somebody's best friend. What I mean is follow up with an appropriate medium. You know, whether it's phone, LinkedIn, or email. Use what you think is going to be the best for the situation and for that person. Not necessarily what you like best. Think about what they may like best. Some of this is generational, although I think that that's changed a lot. I think that now pretty much all age groups are comfortable using things like email, and many people have a LinkedIn account. As far as phone goes, if you feel comfortable calling somebody, by all means, pick up the phone and give them a call. It doesn't have to be a huge follow-up. You don't have to type them a novella. Simply sending them a little message that says, hey, it was great to meet with you, hope we stay in touch. That would be adequate to just kind of give them that, jog their memory, remind them who you are, and kind of help sear your personal brand into their brain. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about LinkedIn. In fact, this is all I'm going to say about LinkedIn is when you connect with somebody on LinkedIn, don't just use the generic LinkedIn, I'd like to add you to my network that comes stock in the LinkedIn invitation. Take 3 seconds, type out 1 or 2 sentences. Loved meeting at the Lewis event yesterday. I also enjoyed having that faculty member as my advisor, and I hope we stay in touch. You know, that alone is going to be perfectly adequate to kind of strengthen the foundation of that relationship. So those are some of the tactical considerations you may want to consider. Now, in conclusion, first, you want to consider what you want to get out of networking. Set your goals and your strategies. Think about how you want to tackle things like associations or networking events. Think about what's the best way to reach your goals. Remember that networking is natural. It's something you do already. You know, networking is kind of a buzzword now. It's a little overused, but at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, and it's our human nature to seek those out. So don't be intimidated by it, and above all, don't fear it. Take the opportunity, seize it, and make sure that you make the most out of what you are given. So that's my conclusion. I'm wondering, Joe, did we have any questions that came through?
Hi, Reggie. Thank you so much. Yes, we do have 3 questions that came in. The first one is from Peyton and Joliet. What advice do you have for someone that is shy?
If you're shy, that's a good question. You know, some of us are naturally outgoing. Maybe some of us are a little too outgoing, and some of us are just a little bit more shy. If you're shy, I would say set realistic expectations for yourself. You know, somebody who is an introvert is going to have a very difficult time walking into a room full of strangers and working the room. Now, earlier I said don't sit with people you know, but that doesn't mean you can't bring a wingman or a friend along with you to help you a little bit. There's nothing wrong with talking to people as part of a small group, and if that's going to make you feel more comfortable, I would say that that's something that's perfectly okay to do. At the end of the day, it's about practice, though. You do have to step out of your comfort zone just a little bit. Do it once or twice and see how you feel. If you're a shy person, you might get more success out of trying to talk to only maybe 2 people at an event instead of trying to work the room and have 10 minutes with everybody. So that would probably be my best advice for somebody that's shy.
Thank you. The second question comes from Chuck in Lockport. What should I do if everyone at the event is from a different industry than I am?
If everybody's from a different industry, there's a few ways that you can handle that. First of all, I would say don't discount the potential value of being in a room with people from a different industry. You know, as much as we've tried, we still haven't found a good way to predict the future, and you never know where you're going to be in 10 or 15 years. And so connections that you make today that may seem to not have a whole lot of, say, career value in the immediate future could end up paying massive dividends down the road. So that's the first thing I would say is don't discount the opportunity. Second of all, you have to remember that networking isn't just about the people that you meet, it's about the people that they know. There's people that are connectors. Malcolm Gladwell has a book called The Tipping Point where he talks a lot about connectors. And these are the kinds of people that seem to know everybody. Now, if you think about your own life, you probably know a few people like that. And if you know that person, they're the one that can get you in touch with somebody that's appropriate. So let's say that you find yourself in an event and you're in criminal justice and everybody there seems to have graduated from our School of Aviation. Well, that's not the end of the world, because you never know who out of that group might have an uncle that's a sheriff, or a brother or a sister that's a police chief. So I would say just be yourself, continue to establish your brand, and try to learn something new about the industry that you're surrounded with.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Valerie in Chicago. How do you insert yourself politely into a conversation in which a group may be talking and there might be one or two people that you really want to speak with?
That's a good question, and I would say that's probably more art than science. You can tell when a group is open to somebody else joining because oftentimes there will be a space, or you look at the body language. If there's two people that are standing face to face, that's probably not a conversation you can really interrupt. That having been said, especially if you're at a networking event, people are there to meet other people. So most people aren't going to necessarily want to talk to the same person the whole time. So there's a couple approaches you could use. The first one would be to simply be patient. Wait until that conversation seems to come to a lull, or that group breaks up a little bit. Sooner or later, somebody's going to want to go refresh their drink, get another plate of food, use the restroom, greet somebody that they just saw. There will be an opportunity that should arise. If there doesn't seem to be, if that doesn't seem to be happening, or maybe you don't have the time to wait around, there's nothing wrong with walking up to the group, patiently waiting for a break in conversation, and then introducing yourself. Nothing wrong with saying, "Excuse me, I overheard and I would like to introduce myself because of whatever reason." I think the key in this is to be natural. So this kind of goes back to your personal brand of being genuine. Don't try to be slick. Don't try to be fake with it. Just be yourself as a person who's looking to connect with somebody else. And almost everybody's going to respond pretty positively to that.
Thank you, Reggie. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope that you found this very informational, very helpful, and we hope to see you at our event on July 31st at our Oak Brook campus. We host these networking events regularly around the Chicagoland area. So our next one is scheduled for July 31st. If you have any ideas or tips for other webcast topics or speakers, please feel free to send them to alumni@LewisULive.edu. Thank you and have a great day.